Hey everybody, Will Hamilton here, and thank you so much for joining me on this live strategy training. A couple days ago, I asked the community, hey, what are your burning strategy questions? What do you want to know about singles? What do you want to know about doubles? What are some plays you can use to win more matches the next time you play? So before we get going, people are coming in now via an email I sent, via Facebook. In the chat, if you could just let me know if you can hear me. Let me know where you're at. Are you in Washington, D.C., like me, like Adam Szyminski, FYB's co-founder, who is off screen. He's monitoring the chat. Say hi, Adam.
Yo.
Probably heard him. He projects. But let us know where you are and whether you can hear me specifically. And then as we keep going, as we get going, Adam's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have a follow-up question to something I'm talking about, or you just have a totally separate question, then I'll answer it. So again, let me know in chat. Adam, maybe just give me a thumbs up if people are saying, yes, I can hear you. And all right, cool. Well, the first question, so this is the first time we're ever doing it, so we're working through the process, but I have all the questions on my phone here, so if you're wondering why I'm scrolling through this thing, well, this is why. The first question is, excuse me. First question, well, they're all from Anonymous, but the first question is, for a 3.0 level, actually, let me read the question, and then maybe what I'll do is I will just condense it down. Okay, cool. So this is a multi-pronged question. How, as a 3.0, as someone with inconsistent shots, can you construct a strategy where you're reducing your mistakes and you're putting pressure, you're still able to put pressure on the opponent? So the play I want to talk about is a play I've talked about a couple days ago, well, not a couple days ago, but recently, called home base, and then I want to expand upon it a little bit. But this is a play from the singles playbook, and let's just construct the situation, and then we're going to talk about how this reduces errors, and then we're going to get into some more nuanced pieces of this play, stuff we haven't talked about yet, because there's a lot to go over. So first question is just, how can we reduce inconsistency? So to do that, we just want to rely first and foremost on the geometry of the tennis court. Corner to corner is 82.5 feet, but down the line is only 78 feet. And what that means is if you hit down the line, you can miss by 4 feet, but if you hit that thing cross court, that ball is still going to be in. So the way this play called home base works is pretty simple. You want to imagine that there is an imaginary line coming out of you into the tennis court. We're going to assume the same for villain up here. So hero, that's you down here, villain up here. And the way this play works is super simple. If the ball crosses the plane of your body, it crosses this imaginary line, the rule is you need to send it back in the direction that it came. Not only are you taking advantage of geometry, when the ball crosses your body like this, it's called an outside ground stroke. It's moving away from you when you hit, and you have less leverage over these tennis balls. You can do less with them. You can't hit with as much power, control, spin, and all that stuff. So you want to reduce your risk by sending it back cross court. And if your opponent hits the ball but it doesn't cross this imaginary line, this is when you are allowed to change the direction of the tennis ball. So you can go back in the direction it came, or you can change the direction, because when the ball is moving into you, you now have more leverage over the ball. You can pull that, kind of think baseball, where a batter is going to pull the pitch, and then for a right-handed batter would hit them mostly to left field because they have more leverage over those balls. Same concept applies here. It's physics. So you can change the direction of the ball more safely. You have more court to work with. But following the simple rule about whether or not the ball crosses this imaginary line is going to allow you to reduce the amount of risk you are taking, and particularly if you're like a 3.0 level, that will clean up a lot of your mistakes. Now, the great thing about this play as well is it forces your opponent to take all the risk to attack you. If you give them an outside ground stroke and they try and go down the line, if they don't hit a good shot, they might miss it. You know, just based on the geometry, you're way more likely to miss it. But if they hit a shot here, that gives you that inside ground stroke that allows you to counterattack. So this is a great play. Again, you force your opponent to take all the risk, and then you have an opportunity to counterattack. So there's a follow-up to this that I want to address. Okay, cool. So let me just read this real quick. How's everybody doing in chat? Good. Participate.
We have people from, you can repeat this, Boston.
Okay, Boston.
London, Germany.
Wow.
Uruguay, Canada.
Uruguay, Czech Republic.
Redwood City, Redwood City, California.
Wilmington, North Carolina.
Indeed.
I went to Davidson College in Charlotte, North Carolina. Played on the team down there.
Dubuque.
Dubuque, Iowa. That was the first place. I went to Dubuque back in 2004, and this is maybe the only time this has happened in the United States. I went into a bar to get a beer, and it was 75 cents. And I was like, how is a beer less than $1? It was just sort of like, wow, this is crazy. DC, everything's overpriced. So that was I don't know if it's a fond memory. Sure, it's a fond memory. It's cheaper, but always something I remembered about Dubuque. It's great. Cascade, Iowa, Field of Dreams. That's where Kevin Costner filmed that movie.
We've got people from, I said Bulgaria, Colombia, Kazakhstan, Brazil.
Brazil. We're in Brazil. I have a friend that lives in Brasilia. Brooklyn's great. My brother lives there, right by the Brooklyn Museum. Okay, cool. So we're going to stick with, welcome again, everybody. Sounds like we've got a diverse group, so that's awesome. We're going to stick with home base because there was another question I got. This is from a gal who says, I'm a 4-0 player, elevating to 4-5. I'm quite powerful. I hit really good shots, which crushes it at the 4-0 level. But then I get to the 4-5 level, players can handle my pace, and I'm not the quickest player around the tennis court, so they're able to run me around, and I'm kind of getting out of position, and then they're hitting to the open court. So I want to stick with home base because this play is also great from a court positioning standpoint. So actually, we'll leave the players up here. So when you are rallying straight down the middle of the court, where you should be standing is in the middle of the court because the goal is to position yourselves in between the angles that your opponent is able to generate. So in a down-the-line rally like this, your opponent can hit through the court. You, of course, can hit through the court, so standing in the middle is the correct spot. But if you're in a cross-court rally like this, then things change a little bit because villains down the line here is still through the court, but when they hit cross-court, the angle has now, there's a greater angle. They can pull you off the court. So standing in the middle is the incorrect place to stand now because you're too exposed over here. You want to stand instead, let's say like right around there. So if you're rallying through the middle, you'd stand directly in the middle. But once you shift over this way, you'd stand about there. And then if we reversed it in the other direction, you would want to stand about there. So back to this question about how do I reduce my exposure to get my opponent getting me out of position. So you would want to, again, use home base. And when you get so the mistake you can make, if the ball comes over here and you take an outside ground stroke into the open court, if you don't hit a good shot, if that ball lands like here, villain can come over, and now the geometry has changed because villain, if they come down the line, they can hit like this, but if they go cross court, they now have a natural angle to counterattack. And your positioning in a situation like this should be here on this positioning point. This is the correct place to be standing when villain's hitting there. But if you're over here and you hit down the line, particularly the further you get to the single sideline, you got to cover all this ground to get to the correct positioning point. And the fact of the matter is, you won't be able to do it. When you go down the line, it is very rare you get to the correct positioning point before villain hits. You might be like there. So it's very easy for villain to counterattack, and you're going to be on the dead run. So if we take things back and we talk about home base, one of the other great things about this play, not only do you force villain to take all the risk to attack you, but it also maintains your correct and advantageous court position. You're not going to get out of position in this particular play. If villain comes down the line and you come over to get it, they're now out of position. Now you have the natural angle to counterattack, and they're going to be on the dead run. So this is definitely a play you also want to use if you feel like you're getting out of position often. The down the line, again, is a great way to get yourself out of position and get yourself into a lot of trouble. Now, the question might be, well, Will, pros go down the line all the time. Good players go down the line all the time. When am I allowed to go down the line? So hitting down the line is great if you do it in the right situation. So a very simple rule to figure out when you should hit down the line is we have this imaginary line here that determines, do we hit it cross court or can we change direction? Let's pretend the baseline here is, it's not imaginary, but it's another kind of thing that will affect our decision making. So if we're behind the baseline, send the ball cross court. If you're able to step inside the baseline, then you can hit this thing down the line because now you're taking time away from villain. So even if they get to this ball, you don't need to hit an outright winner. Even if they get to it, we're not expecting them, because you've pressured them, to be able to generate this kind of angle. We would expect them to leave the ball somewhere in the middle. So this is going to be easier for you to get to this particular shot. So this is a good way that you can, if you want to add an extra layer to home base and you want to take some initiative and go down the line, use the baseline as your next sort of line that you use to make a decision. So any questions, comments in chat so far, Adam? We good?
Not yet.
Silent observers, apparently. Well, then we will move on to the next question, but please engage if you feel so inclined.
Jeffrey Peterson just had a question about
What's up, Jeff?
defending high backhands to the corner.
Okay, defending high backhands.
Let's make sure we have a clean start on.
Yeah, I'm gonna start. Is Jeff, while I scroll through, can you be more specific? So when I asked these questions earlier, I haven't used every single. So first of all, everybody who submitted a question ahead of time, thank you so much. I haven't used all of them, and there's a very specific reason when I got a ton of them. But if the question is vague, it's hard to answer. So Jeff, your question, how do I defend the high backhand? If you give me some more specifics, like where are you, obviously you're in the backhand corner, but where is your opponent standing? What has he been doing? Kind of paint that picture so it's a little bit sharper so I can give a more specific answer to your question. Okay, so while Jeff, you focus on that one, I'm going to figure out what to do with my phone, and then we're going to take a doubles question. And if anybody wants one of these playbooks, by the way, the singles playbook or the doubles playbook, I'm biased, but I think they're awesome. You can just come back to the website, fuzzyyellowballs.com, and there's links to check it out, see if it's right for you, and pick up a copy if you are so inclined. So we are going to go, all right, it doesn't really matter if you're serving or not. So the question I have received here, let me double check it, and then I will answer it. Okay, perfect. So the question, the question. Work in progress. So what do you do if you are serving in the ad court, but you're left-handed? And the situation is you hit your serve, return comes back, and then this player in particular has a tendency with their forehand to kind of leave it a little bit high, and then the returner's partner is able to poach on that thing and put it away. So this is a tip I learned from Martina Navratilova, and it doesn't matter if you're a lefty or a righty in this situation. It's a great tip. It's a little bit counterintuitive. So you're hitting this high ball that is getting crushed and poached by the net player. So you might think, well, I need to get the ball down, or I need to rip it, or I need to hit it behind. Actually, what you want to do is hit it even higher. So what you're trying to do is get it up over their backhand shoulder. So for a right-hander, this is going to be a backhand volley. So if it's high but it's still here, they can hit a good volley. But if they're now reaching like this, where it's almost a backhand overhead, then they're not going to be able to do anything with it. They're going to hit a weak shot, then your partner's going to come in and clean up. So one way to think about it is you hit your ground stroke even higher, or you hit like a low lob. Like you're not trying to actually clear this person necessarily. You just want to force them to hit a high backhand volley, like really high backhand volley, or high backhand overhead. One nuance to this is you want to make sure they are not coming to the net. You go high, and it gets back to a player who's staying back. If they're coming in, then this could be a high volley or an approach shot, and then you might get your partner killed. So that is the one nuance, but that's the, this again was Martina's tip. She's like, in the ad court, just hit it high over the righty's high backhand, and you're going to be good to go. So did Jeff follow up yet?
Not yet.
He hasn't.
Okay.
Oh, he has.
He did, actually, sorry. He says, my opponent comes in when I attempt to return these shots and puts it away.
Okay. So
Talk about defending high backhands from the corner. My opponent comes in on when I attempt to return these shots and puts it away. So it sounds like his opponent is driving deep to the corner on his backhand and then immediately coming in, and he wants to know how to defend.
And I'm assuming, okay, so I'll repeat the question. So the question is, we're in a cross-court rally like this, and it's high to the backhand. I'm assuming players getting pushed back. So you're backing up, hitting a backhand, which is like the hardest shot to handle in tennis, probably looping it back, and then this player's stepping in and hitting either a volley or a ground stroke. Was that clarified out of curiosity? Was it a volley or was it just a ground stroke?
It wasn't clarified. It was just basically the opponent is hitting deep to his backhand, and he wants to know what to do with that ball because the guy follows it in and ends the point.
Yeah. Okay. So, couple. There's no good answer here. Is unfortunately the situation. So if you are backing up like that, you're already going to lose most of those points. So the first answer is try and avoid that situation. We'll talk more about that a little bit later when we get into some lefty-righty stuff. But there's a couple things you can do. The first is you can actually come, if it's a high loopy ball, you can actually come inside the baseline and kind of hit a volley if you have that ability. There's a drill on YouTube that I did with Yano Zoo. This has got to be like 8, 9 years old at this point. It's called the inside man drill. And basically the way the drill works is just you and your partner, as you're rallying, have to stand inside the baseline, hit everything inside the baseline. You're not allowed to back up. So that's one way to work on taking the ball either early, which is certainly an option, hard to do, or just taking it clean out of the air. Also something you can do. So the other recommendation, if you're pushed back like that, typically when you're taught, okay, I'm pushed back, I'm gonna roll it back, give myself time, but this person's smart and is moving in to take that ball out of the air. So what you can do instead, if you're still backing up, is actually drive that ball as much as you're able to and try and land it around here. Because if this person's closing, then you're going to hit it relatively hard. You're going to keep it lower like a normal ground stroke. And ideally, you want it to kind of land, at their feet would be ideal. But if you can't pull that off, just drive it hard at them and force them to hit a half volley. Certainly not a high ball where they can step in and hit an approach shot. And then ideally, they pop it up, and then you are able to close and do something with that shot. So this is going to become a cat and mouse game in this situation, because if they're coming in behind this and you drive it here, that's a good shot, right? That'll put some pressure on them. But if they hang out and then you hit this same shot, now it's kind of a short ball, which they can then step in and attack. But then if they hang out back here, your high ball is more effective, right? Because then it pushes them back. So this is just going to be a situation where you're going to be playing that cat and mouse game based on what Villain's trying to do, what they're trying to do with their positioning, and you just got to keep an eye out and adjust as the match goes on. So hopefully, Jeff, that answers your question. We're going to move on. And anybody else, if you have questions, please jump in chat and go ahead and ask.
Lucas had a question about what is the best way to avoid hitting backhands against a left-hander, but I think you might be headed for something.
What was the question? What was the question? I'm sorry.
What's the best way to avoid hitting backhands against a lefty?
That's a tough one, man. Hold on, let me find that lefty question. I think I had one in here. Well, that's not working very well. That was Lucas's question?
Yes.
Okay, cool. How's that awkward silence for everybody? Good? What's the line from Pulp Fiction? It's like, you finally found someone where you can have an awkward silence. Something like that? You can influence with this. Okay, cool. We're going to take, I'm going to take a question somebody submitted, and then Lucas, I'll come back to your question. So how do you get the returner in this case? You're serving. How do you get the returner to hit their return at your forehand, right? And preferably short so you can step in and rip it. So this might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but on the deuce court, the best thing to do, often, not always, but often, is to serve out wide. You're just taking advantage of the geometry, and the ball is going to come back cross court and kind of tail away from you, and then you can take that ball into the open court. This is something that Federer does all the time. Our good buddy Craig O'Shaughnessy says, his analysis, he's sort of an analytics guy, about 50% of Fed serves in the deuce court go out wide because he wants that ball coming back cross court, and he's using a play called serve +1. So the serve goes out wide, the +1 is a forehand, and in this case, it's a forehand. He drives down the line, not going for a narrow target. He's going for a very big target, kind of just in the middle of the ad court here. And the goal is simply to get the returner moving back to hit a backhand like this. So I mentioned earlier, moving back is like, to hit a backhand is like the hardest thing to do in tennis. So this is what Fed is doing to set that up. Now to add to that, there's another question. We're gonna wing this a little bit and make up some plays, make up some terminology. This play is called serve +1. There are a ton of variations of how it actually works, but at its core, it's a serve followed by a forehand. It's a central play in the singles playbook. We're going to call what I'm about to describe serve +1 A, and we'll see if that terminology sticks. But the question later that I got submitted was, well, will serve and volley in the singles game doesn't exist anymore? It's dead. And that's not entirely true, but the main thing is it's been modified. So people rarely serve and volley now. They go serve +1, and then after they hit that +1, they come to net. So Fed does this. You should do this. A lot of pros do this. Rafa actually does this a lot and did it against Medvedev in the US Open final. So to take this framework, serve out wide, return cross court to the forehand, hit into the open court, and then you come to net and stand right there. So serve, the +1's an approach shot, then you come to net. And in this situation, you could very easily get a lob if somebody's moving back to hit a backhand, but you're going to get some kind of weak shot. And especially if you see this person running and they go to the slice, you should immediately come to net because that thing's going to float through the middle, and that'll be a super simple ball for you to volley into the open court for a winner. So that is how this would work in the deuce court. Same question, how do I get the ball to come to my forehand in the ad court? And in this case, you would serve out wide again. I think it's about 50% for Fed. And when you serve out wide to the backhand, ball is going to come back cross court. In this case, you could actually take a couple steps to the left. Because if you hit a decent serve, you're not expecting a down the line shot. So you want as much of the court controlled by your forehand as possible. And then you can just run the same play if you want to. The +1 can be in the open court. You could do, if your opponent's hustling this way, +1 cross court. It's a little bit safer shot, and then you force them to stop, turn around, and hit a backhand. So that's going to depend a little bit on your opponent. But in either case, the serve out wide is a great way to get the ball coming back to your forehand. You're leveraging the geometry, and then make sure you run serve +1, maybe serve +1A. We'll see if that terminology sticks. Just let me know in the comments. So Lucas's question, if we come back to it, it was, remind me, Adam, but it was, how do I, the lefty-righty setup?
Yeah, it was how do I avoid hitting backhands against a lefty?
So It's the short answer is you want to avoid getting into an exchange like that to begin with. So we'll go righty down here and lefty up here. So I'm left-handed, for those of you who don't know, and my favorite play, it's the play Rafa uses all the time. It's called the battering ram, and you can actually use this against a lefty as well, but it's basically forehand at the backhand, and you just keep hammering away until you get a short ball. Obviously, if you're the righty down here, you would do the exact same thing and attack, my backhand, attack a lefty's backhand, but you just keep using the geometry of the court, right? It's the longest part of the court, so you're making the high percentage play and you're attacking. So if we come back to, this is happening to your backhand, difficult situation because you have no good options in this case. If you try and go down the line, it's bad geometry, like we talked about before. You're hitting an outside ground stroke. You're likely to miss if you leave it short. Lefty steps in and rips it cross court. You're out of position. Not a great situation to be in. But then if you send it back cross court, then you're going at the strength. So there's two options you can try outside of just, we'll go three, actually. We'll go three options that I would recommend trying. The first is the high loopy ball down the line. So you're aiming for a very, very big target. You're just trying to get air under it, and you're just trying to direct it over towards the lefty's backhand. Now, somebody like Rafa, somebody who's real quick, might try and run around and hit a forehand. I don't know what level you are, Lucas, but that's probably going to be tougher for most folks. So I would just go, you can go that high ball and try and change the geometry of the rally. If the lefty tries to go back down the line, well, maybe you keep sending it down the line. That's a different play, and then it becomes sort of this cat and mouse game of who's going to take the initiative here. But that's one thing you can try. Another is the exact opposite. If this lefty is not hitting really high balls, the ball's a little bit lower, maybe a little bit flatter, you have to deal with the pace. But if you have a decent slice, you can actually aim for the exact same target, but slice it and try and keep it low. And this can be a good play because then the lefty's not going to be able to get around it, and then they're going to have to hit up on this ball, so it's unlikely you're going to get hurt. Right? This one I might expect to come cross court because the net becomes more of an obstacle in this case. You have to feel it out based on villain, but that can be a good one. So when would you try the high ball? If they're giving you high balls, it's better to try the high ball over here because it's hard to slice when the ball is up above your shoulder. If they're hitting flatter, lower shots, then the slice might be a better option. But either way, you're not taking as much risk trying to redirect the flow of that. And then what was the other one I was talking about? If you get the opportunity, this is also not an amazing high percentage thing. Like you're going to lose most of these points, but it's more effective maybe than what you're doing. Is to try and rip it cross court. You rip it and then you actually hold your ground and hope that the ensuing shot comes to your forehand and you can take control of the point. The danger in this situation is if you don't hit a good shot, then the down the line becomes an option. So that's another thing you're going to have to feel out based on the type of opponent you're facing. If you're playing an aggressive baseliner, I would expect more down the lines because they have that shot. If you're playing a counter puncher, less likely to happen. They're more trying to keep the ball in play, playing the percentages, and sort of waiting for you to miss. So it just depends on who you're facing. But feel it out. Those three options are good places to start. This is what I do as a lefty. So if a righty's attacking my backhand, I'm going to use one of these three is typically what I do. So try that out. Let me know how it goes. We'll move on to the next question. How's chat going?
It's going well. We got a couple more questions in here.
Okay, cool. Trying to balance out. Why don't I take a pre-canned one and then we'll go. All right, here's a good doubles one. Are we getting mostly singles questions, Adam, in chat, or is it doubles questions too?
Well, we've got both.
We've got both. All right, well, why don't we tee up a doubles question after this next one? Nope, go there. All right. So, all right, here we go. So this next question how do you deal with an opponent, an opposing team that drop shots you and then lobs you? So there's a number of scenarios that this can happen in, but let's just take a typical one up, one back situation. And let's say the opponent here hits a drop shot, pulls you in, and then you hit it back, and then the next shot is a lob. So that's very tough to do. The drop shot lob combination, I actually love this because the person's running in to get to the drop shot, their momentum's carrying them forward, they're really close to the net, so it's super easy to lob them back. So in a situation like this, the configuration of the players might be different, but what I would recommend trying, if villain hits a drop shot here, you come in to get it, try and hit it at this person right here and have your shot land at their feet. So this is something I learned from the Bryan brothers. It's a play called the Preacher. And basically the way you want to visualize it from a side perspective is this is you over here and your shot, so they pull you in, right? You're coming in. Your shot needs to land at their feet. Because from there, it's very hard for them to do anything, and they're probably just going to hit up, well, they have to hit up on the ball to get it above the net, and that's now a ball you can hit down on. It's going to be very difficult for them to lob you. It's going to be very difficult, honestly, for them to do anything except try and defend, and that's a way you can turn this situation around. The key with this shot is to make sure that you're scooting it through the court. You don't want to pop it up because then this person can step back and just hit a ground stroke and rip it. So you gotta, it's not a drop shot. Like that's what I'm trying to say. You're trying to kind of slide it through the court and aiming for this person's feet. If you try and do the same thing here, this person can come in and hit a ground stroke. If you try and do the redrop, then if you don't hit a good drop shot, they can also come in and rip it or lob it or do whatever. So actually going directly at the net person and trying to land it at their feet can be an excellent play. Takes out the ability to hit a quality lob over your head. So go to a question now, Adam, if we got one.
Sure. David, do you want doubles or singles?
Let's go doubles just because I got the icons up here.
Okay. That was, where is it? What strategy should I be trying to use in doubles when the opponents use signals and are very active at the net?
At the net, okay. Who's asking the question?
That is Kevin Flynn.
Kevin?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So
Let's have a
clean start, yeah. Trying to figure out which marker I'm going to use. So Kevin, thank you for the question. And yeah, okay. Question was, how do I?
What
Oh, yeah,
should I be doing
signals,
in doubles
okay.
If my
Yeah.
opponents are using hand signals and communicating and are very active at the net?
Yep. So the question, just to repeat it for everybody, my opponents are hyper aggressive. They're using hand signals and they're very aggressive at the net. So the first piece of advice is just ignore the hand signals. That's just something that you don't need to think about. They're either going to move or they're not going to move, and who cares, right? So the advice I always get from whether it's the Bryan brothers or Navratilova or Gigi is when you have someone that's super aggressive, is you got to pick your return spots ahead of time. And if they move, great. And if they don't, and you hit it right at them, okay, that happens. But you get yourself into more trouble when you're trying to watch the net person and watch the ball. You can't do both, and you're going to miss a lot of returns. So they're winning the point simply by forcing you to make sort of an unforced error. Now, the thing you can do that can add a little variety and increase your percentage is if the ball comes to your forehand, you will have pre-decided, well, I'm going to return it cross court. And if it comes to your backhand, you will have planned ahead of time, I'm going to take that down the line. So you want to pick both a forehand and a backhand return to begin with, and then stick with it. Doesn't matter if they go or they don't go. Some targets to keep in mind as you figure out where you should be aiming. Right here, maybe like the center net strap, but like slightly to the left in this case. Try and keep it low. Try and keep the ball through there. That's going to be tougher volleys for them to hit. Obviously, if you can dip it over there, that's great. That might not be a shot in your arsenal. There's the, if they're super aggressive, right there can be a good target. And this would be, if it comes into your backhand in this case, this is like where you can pull it, right? It's an inside ground stroke. So you can hit it over there, and the volley will probably come back kind of towards you if they hit it. So you're going to get another swing at the ball. And if you move them over there, then you can hit the next one through the middle. And then the last one is a lob, or not necessarily a lob, but like a high ball, because it goes back to the high over the backhand, where you aim for a pretty big target and you don't care if they get their racket on it. We call this shot the parachute. You're just trying to get it high over the backhand shoulder. Imagine the tennis ball sort of has a parachute on it, slowly coming down. And if they get a racket on it, that ball is 100% going to go there the next time. So if you try that shot, just anticipate the next shot's going to be here, start moving in that direction, and then you can hit through the middle and put that thing away. But to bring it back, pick, forehand, backhand, pick your targets ahead of time, start there, and then if you're still getting killed and villain has a good serve, this person's got great volley, super aggressive, then I would tell, this is another Martina tip, have your partner not necessarily go all the way back to the baseline, that might be the last resort, have them stand in no man's land. Because if they're standing here, then there's a hole for villain to volley through, but if they're standing here now, then they're keeping more balls in front of them, and they can pick something off and keep the point going. So last resort, have your partner adjust their position, and then you'll be able to sort of work your way into the points better. All right, let me, and please keep firing out questions if you got any. So we're going to come back. This is actually a good singles one related to what we just talked about. So I'll just tee it up. The question is going to be about when to use a drop shot. In singles. So when should you use a drop shot? A lot of the times you see the pros do it, and maybe it could be an outright winner. Particularly like Federer has so much touch that it looks like he's aiming for like right above the net, and you don't even want your opponent to get to it. But a lot of the times that's not realistic. So the drop shot can be the first shot in a 1-2 shot combination. So whether this would be a forehand or a backhand, doesn't really matter. It might be better off the backhand, get a little bit more slice. But a great thing you can do is hit the drop shot here. Now, you don't care. You're not trying to go for an outright winner. That's a great way to make a lot of errors. Just aim kind of for the middle of the service box, maybe a little bit closer to the net. But you don't mind if villain gets to it. You just want to make sure that they're hitting up on that ball. So basically what that means is you want your drop shot to be good enough where they are hitting the ball when the ball has dropped below the net. They're still getting to it. The ball's just below the net. They have to hit up, so you're going to be able to get to that next shot. Now, doesn't matter where that next shot is. Could be here, whatever. You're going to hit that parachute we just discussed. It's just going to be high, aiming for this target. You don't care if they hit it. I mean, if you get it over their head, great. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a high backhand overhead, like the hardest shot in tennis. So if the ball's somewhere over here, you hit it over there. If the ball comes over here, that's cool too. Just aim for that target. You've pulled them in. They're going to now have to move back to get to that thing. It's going to be an incredibly difficult shot for them to do anything with. The next ball is going to be sitting here, and then you just hit it into the open court. If they let it get over their head and bounce, you come to net behind that, and then you're almost certainly going to get like a lob back that you can then hit an overhead into the open court or some kind of weak attempt at a passing shot. But that's a great way to think about the drop shot as the first in a drop shot lob combination, or maybe a better way to describe it is a drop shot parachute combination is an incredibly effective play that reduces the risk with that initial drop shot, where you don't have to pull out the crazy Federer drop shot that requires an insane amount of talent. So do we have more questions? Adam's typing furiously. I'm like, something must be going on.
We do. Actually, here's a quick one for you.
Okay, cool.
Maurice.
What up, man? Maurice.
Can you use the plays in the playbook for any kind of different surface, like clay versus hard court? And do they change based on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was like whether it's the singles playbook or the doubles playbook. Do the plays change based on surface? So you'd be surprised. I was surprised when I heard this. So go back to Craig O'Shaughnessy, who I mentioned earlier. He has looked at rally length on grass courts, on hard courts, on clay courts. And the assumption is that on a grass court or a fast hard court, points are going to be way shorter. And then on a clay court, they're going to be way longer. And what he found was basically the 0 to 4. So like points that are a 0 would be a double fault, but like 4 shots or less is basically the exact same on a clay court or a grass court or a hard court. It's kind of shocking. It's like 65, 70% of the points are less than 4 shots. They're 4 shots or less. So the reason I bring that up is because the plays you run don't really change that much, hard court to grass court to clay court. There's a little bit of variation. I mean, the ball is going to kick up higher on a clay court. It's harder once the rally has started to maybe get a ball by someone. Rafa can track down a couple extra shots on a on a clay court versus a grass court, but they are very, very similar. Serve +1, for example, you don't deviate from that play. So the answer, frankly, is no, they don't change all that much. You factor in a little bit. If you're using, like trench warfare might be one where that's where you're hitting it higher down the middle to push people back. That's going to be a little bit more effective on a clay court because the ball kicks up higher, right? Or the battering ram, ball kicks up higher. So like Rafa's using it to kick it up high to a righty's backhand. So that would be a play that might be a little bit more suited to clay, but it works well. I mean, Rafa just won the U.S. Open running the exact same play. So little nuances, but at the end of the day, it's quite similar. And if you want, by the way, I think I mentioned this earlier, but if you want to pick up a copy of either playbook, singles or doubles, you can just go to fuzzyyellowballs.com, check it out, kind of give you the whole scoop of what the plays are and how the playbooks work there. Okay, question about the red zone. So there's this concept in the singles playbook called the red zone. And the red zone we stole from American football. So the red zone in American football is basically once you get to it, you're very likely to score a touchdown. You're not going to score a touchdown all the time. So here's the red zone in the singles playbook. You're not going to score a touchdown all the time, but let's say like 65% of the time a team in American football gets to the red zone, they either score a touchdown or kick a field goal. They get points in some capacity. So another way to think about it is you're in the red zone, you're very likely to score points. Now, when it comes to tennis, we've taken that term because when you get to the red zone, you are very likely to win the point. You're not going to win it all the time, but if you can repeatedly get to this situation, you are going to win most of those points. And you're going to win the match as a result, right? So you basically want to build your entire game around getting to this situation as fast as possible. And we're going to talk about it from a right-hander versus right-hander situation. So we've talked a little bit about geometry earlier and inside and outside ground strokes. I'm going to fire through this a little bit quicker and not get into all the nuance, but basically the red zone is when you are standing over here in your backhand corner, but you are controlling the middle of the court with your forehand like this. Villain is over in the backhand corner, and we're going to go with the imaginary lines. So you are hitting forehands, inside ground strokes, cross court, long part of the tennis court, right? The highest percentage part of the tennis court. You're giving villain outside ground strokes, which are not as good as inside ground strokes, right? Less leverage over the tennis ball, can't do as much. And it's a backhand. So you're going strength at weakness, highest percentage part of the court, and you got inside and outside ground strokes. So you got those three things stacked in your favor. I'll repeat it. You're going forehand backhand, strength versus weakness, sword versus shield in our terminology. You're going highest percentage or longest part of the court, lowest part of the net, so you got the geometry working for you, and you've got inside and outside ground strokes, so you got physics working for you. You're able to pull the tennis ball, they're pushing it. So when you get to this situation, Villain is trapped because the only way they get out of this is they hit a low percentage shot down the line, right? 78 feet, you can miss it wide, you can miss it long, higher part of the net. If they don't hit a good shot, then it's still on your forehand, and then you could rip it into the open court, hit a winner, whatever, come to net. So that's low percentage. The other thing they had to do is they could get it over here to your backhand, but you've slid over, you've made this a small target to aim for, and that's just a hard shot to do when you're going strength at weakness over there. So if you can navigate, that's what the singles playbook basically shows you, regardless of your opponent, and regardless of whether you're serving, returning, rallying, villains approaching, or heroes approaching, we show you how to navigate to this situation. Because once you get here, like I said, you are going to win most of those points. And if you construct your entire tennis game, your singles game around this, you're going to win a lot of matches. So that is the red zone. There was a question related to that, which I'm going to go back to. So the question was simply, what if I'm up here and my opponent is doing this to me? Like, what if, whether or not the person intuitively understands this, how do I get out of it? And the answer is, I just described it, it's very, very difficult. So you don't even want to get here, right? You want to avoid this as much as possible. Let me talk about actually one thing Federer does to avoid this exact situation. And he does this against Djokovic. He does this against a lot of players, but it's most noticeable, I think, against Djokovic. All right. So we're going to go Federer down here. Djokovic is up here. Imaginary line. Imaginary line. Okay. So you got Federer down here. You got Djokovic up here. They're in a cross-court backhand to backhand rally, outside ground strokes. And from this situation, right, the red zone is just a matter of, let's say, Djokovic sliding over and now he's got a forehand, right? Or Federer sliding over and now he's got a forehand. The problem for Federer is that Djokovic has a better backhand than Federer. So Federer is, let me rephrase it this way, Djokovic is more likely to end up in the red zone in a backhand-to-backhand rally than Federer is. So what Fed will also often do is, in a rally like this, let's just say you just like generically go cross-court like this, Djokovic is going to slowly inch over, right? He's going to rip a good backhand, and then he's going to step over because he knows that the ensuing shot is probably going to be somewhere over here. He's not worried about the down the line if he hits a really good shot. So what Fed will do earlier in a rally is he'll take a backhand and he'll aim it right there. He'll aim it like relatively big target. He's not trying to take risks. He's not going for a winner. His goal is to just hit a good shot with some pace that pushes back. So even though it's a forehand for Djokovic, he wants to push him back so that Djokovic hits the ball through the middle of the court, which now is a forehand for Federer, right? And then Federer would now have control of this point and be able to do some damage. Now, the way he did this actually goes back to a question from earlier, which is like, well, what about the surfaces? Is it different clay? Is it different hard court? Is it different grass? So this is what Fed will do on a hard court. But on a grass court, you go back, watch Wimbledon, what Fed was doing was instead of driving that ball, he would slice it like this. And he would keep it short and low. Djokovic would come in. The next shot would be like this, cross court. And then Fed would take that forehand down the line like this, and Djokovic would have to move backwards to hit a backhand if he got it, if it wasn't an outright winner at all. So this was actually one of the most effective patterns, one of the most effective plays. The backhand alternating topspin slice is called the Swiss watch. That's in the singles playbook as well. But that was one of Federer's most effective plays against Djokovic in the Wimbledon final. So a little bit of a nuance there to go back to that question earlier. Adam, how are we doing? Any other questions filtering through on chat?
Leslie asks,
Hi, Leslie.
how do you deal with someone who doesn't respect any of the plays you try to run and just hits the ball hard as they can? And they're somewhat consistent as well.
So what do you mean, like, doesn't respect? Like, you're running a play, I'm assuming, like...
Right, it's just they're trying to blast the ball anywhere as hard as they can, essentially, at all times.
Oh, well, then I would, like, totally go back to... Leslie, I don't know how long you've been on this. So the question was, like, let's say you're trying to run a play and they're just, like, ripping the ball and, I guess, going for winners. I think the framing was they don't respect the play.
Right.
So I would run a play like home base, which I talked about earlier. You can jump back and check that out. There's another video called Roger Federer's Imaginary Line Rule, that a video in our channel that we released a couple weeks ago. But if the person is trying to change direction and go to the open court, use a high percentage play. You're forcing them to take the risk. And unless they hit a screaming winner or a really good shot, their aggression is going to play right into your hands. So home base is a great play to use there, because they're just going to, unless they're just straight up better than you, they're going to, if you're even, that play is going to result in a lot of opportunities for you. If they're just significantly better than you, then, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what play I run against Federer, I'm probably not going to do very well. All right, let me see. So here's a quick serve one. That's pretty good. So what do you do when your opponent is just ripping your serve, right? They're hitting these great returns, they're pressuring you, you don't know where the ball is going to go, and it's just keeping you totally off balance. So the conventional wisdom with serving in singles is to aim for the corners, right? Or you go wide to the forehand, you go tee to the backhand, but you're hitting it away from your opponent. You're trying to kind of get it by them, and that's primarily what you see at the pro level. I'd say like 80% of the serves are either wide or tee, just trying to get the ball by somebody. And certainly that mentality filters down to the club level. Now, in doubles, it's different. You want to use body serves a lot more often. And there's a number of reasons for that. The most obvious is you have a net partner now that's just trying to pick off all the returns. So you're not as worried about returns in play because, and you actually want to get more serves in so that you're not hitting second serve. You want to increase your first serve percentage so that your partner has a lot of opportunities to pick off the return. So when it comes back to singles, if you're taking the singles strategy approach, a lot of the times when you go wide, it gives your opponent time to get a full swing at the tennis ball and can really hurt you, particularly if your serve doesn't have a lot on it. And it gives them an opportunity to go down the line, open court, right at you. It's harder to figure out what exactly is about to happen. So what you can do instead is start hitting a lot more body serves. And there's two reasons for that. One is they have to get out of the way of the ball. So, as opposed to, like, if you, I'm a lefty, but it doesn't really matter. If you serve tee, I'm able to step out, load on my outside leg, and take a full swing. A righty, wide, I can step out, load, take a full swing. But you hit a body serve, it's a lot harder when you're getting out of the way of the ball to get out of the way, then set my feet, and take a full swing. So that's number one. That's the number one reason you'd want to do it. The other reason is it gives you an opportunity to read where their shot is going to go. Because if you go body, this player is going to have to decide, am I going to step this way to hit a backhand or step this way to hit a forehand? Now, based on which way they go, you can get a pretty good idea of where that return is going to go. If they decide to slide this way to hit a forehand, they're moving this way to hit a forehand, they're probably going to pull it. it's almost certainly going to come back cross court like that, just based on how they're moving and what they're physically able to do. Now, if they decide instead to step that away, they're going to step to their right, but our left, to hit a backhand, well, then it changes, and they probably are going to pull it down the line like that. So you can get a window and a little bit of insight into which direction they're going to hit when you go body based on which direction they are moving, and that'll give you more of an opportunity to prepare and be ready for that next shot. So hopefully that was helpful. More questions, Adam? Maybe. We're coming up. We've been at this, I think we budgeted like an hour or something like that. So.
Well, there's a good one here from Peter.
Okay. What's up, Peter? You can go. I'm just.
Okay. The question is,
I'm just looking at cat pictures on Facebook at this point.
Right. In singles, is it better to approach up the middle, as Budge advised Mac, versus Lendl, or to go to the corners?
That's a good question. And who asked this question again?
That was Peter.
Peter, if you want to, I can give you a little bit more nuance to this if you tell me what type of villain you're facing. So 7 types of villains: pusher, counterpuncher, aggressive baseliner, serve and volleyer, Dr. Feelgood, that's like a slicer, a junk baller, all-court player, and a southpaw. So like lefty like me. So the type of approach shot is going to depend on who you are facing. That's one of the big things we focus on in the singles playbook, is how you approach depends on who you are facing. So there are a couple approach plays you can use against like an aggressive baseliner. A good one can be what we refer to as the bulldozer, and that's where so like McEnroe. What was that? Was it Don Budge he was saying recommended that McEnroe approach up the middle? So McEnroe would actually hit a short slice angled at the backhand. This is a play we call the newt. Martina Navratilova taught it to me. But you're hitting it here and it's low, right? So you want to pull your opponent in, and then what happens from here is passing shots are like that. You've cut off some angles, and anything is going to be rising above the net. So you're going to get a volley above the net that you can then hit into the open court. You could hit it right back at them, at their feet, if you wanted to. So that actually is an incredibly effective one, very, very underutilized. So that would be the one I would highly recommend you try. So this is what McEnroe did a ton, right? And Martina did it a ton too. Again, it's the newt, N-E-W-T, like a lizard. The other one you're talking about, so that one's like through the middle versus into the corners. So this one, we call it the layup, and this would be where your approach shot, typically on your forehand, you would kind of hook it off the court like that, get your opponent on the run. Even though this is the forehand, what you're trying to do is get all of this open court so that if your volleys are a little bit weaker, then it doesn't matter because the volley's a layup, right? You're right by the basket. Okay, I can probably get that in versus having to be, shoot a three-pointer, which requires a lot more skill. So the layup's a good one if your volleys are a little bit shaky because you got to get your opponent off the court. Then you don't need to do as much. You just sort of need to get it over there, and you should be good to go. So there's a lot of nuance to approaching the net. A lot of it's going to depend on your skill set. A lot of it's going to depend on who you are facing. Adam, why don't we do one more question, then probably wrap up.
Sure. This is, I think, a quick one for you here.
All right, cool.
This is more of a curious question. This is from Gian or Giant. I'm not 100% sure.
G-I-A-N?
Yes.
Gian?
This is more of a curious question.
What up,
Do
G?
you ever use science and equations for tennis?
We are, funny you should bring that up. We're working on it. If anyone's a data scientist out there watching this, please let me know. And so somebody who's doing a lot of wonderful work, I mentioned him earlier, Craig O'Shaughnessy. He is the man when it comes to stats. He's does analytics for Djokovic, and it's one of the reasons Djokovic is having so much success now. He did analytics for Matteo Berrettini. So Berrettini, if you hadn't heard of him 3 weeks ago, if you still haven't heard of him, it's because not many people had, and then he came out of nowhere and made it to the semis of the U.S. Open, lost to Rafa. Djokovic, Craig was doing analytics for Berrettini. And so it makes a huge difference. and it's just now coming into tennis, right? Like 20 years ago, Billy Beane with sabermetrics and Moneyball is the term you might have heard, completely changed baseball, right? We used to only focus on hits and home runs, but then he discovered, okay, well, there's on-base percentage, there's slugging percentage, there's WAR, that are huge indicators of the quality of players and what determines wins and losses. That mindset has now gone to basketball. Used to be that players would shoot all sorts of mid-range jumpers, like 20-foot jumpers, which turns out has the lowest point per shot of all shots, right? You want to basically look at heat maps. If you Google point per shot heat map for the NBA, you only want to shoot layups or shoot three-pointers. Those are the two shots with the highest point per shot. Or if you're James Harden and the Rockets, do either one of those, three-pointer or drive, and get fouled, because the absolute highest percentage shot in tennis is a foul shot. So that's one of the reasons Harden gets criticized so much, is like, and the Rockets as being like boring because they try and draw fouls all the time. An interesting stat: Harden is like, for three-pointers, gets fouled at twice the rate as everybody else. I don't know if that's because he sticks his foot out to like draw contact or something. American football is also going in that direction. I'm not quite as familiar with those stats, but long story short, tennis is catching up, but we are not quite there. So any data scientists out there, give me a call. Be happy to chat. So that was probably a longer answer than Gian was hoping for, but interesting times to be in tennis. So I think with that, we've covered most of the questions.
Let's take one more.
One more question. Just kidding. We'll take one more.
Yep.
We'll do one.
Because we addressed this specifically actually in the playbook. How do you handle someone who keeps nuding you?
Oh, okay, that's a good one. So the newt, we've been talking about it.
Well, let's go.
Yeah, I know. Don't get ahead of me, man.
Yep.
All right. So how do you handle someone who's using the newt against you? So the newt, if you're just joining now, is a shot that's short and low to the backhand. It forces you to hit up. It's an approach shot. So this player is going to come in, and then your next shot, you are forced to hit up on it. And that allows villain to hit down on the next volley. You're completely out of position, and you're going to lose a lot of those points. So like John McEnroe, Martina Navratilova made careers out of this shot. It's an incredible shot for doubles in particular, even though I'm diagramming it for singles. So the solution is something I learned from Bob and Mike Bryan. It's a shot called the preacher. Now the preacher can be thought of as sort of like re-newting your opponent. So you're going to take this ball, hit it right back at your opponent, and the goal, there's the net, here's you, hero, here's villain. The goal is to get it to land at their feet, right? Then you are forcing them to hit up on that ball. You continue to close, and then you can hit down on that next shot. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, because you typically think, oh, well, I need to hit a passing shot, and I need to get the ball right by someone. That's actually not the case. You want to go right at them. Just make sure you land it at their feet. Do not hit a drop shot. That will allow them to step back, set up, and rip it. Obviously, don't overcook it, because then it's a volley for them. But you're trying to hit the shot that kind of scoots through the court, right? It doesn't allow them back up to hit a ground stroke, and it kind of just forces them to play the ball based on where they're standing right then and there. And again, that's what you do. If they use the newt, you use the preacher, which is basically, like I said before, re-newting your opponent. But an incredibly effective play, something we talk about a lot in both the singles playbook and the doubles playbook. A lot of ways you can use this shot, incredibly effective. If you want to pick up either one of those, you can just go to fuzzyyellowballs.com and get the deets on either one. But I think that's a wrap for this. So just, you can leave in the comments below, or shoot an yeah, I mean, there's going to be permanent comments, I guess, as well as the live chat. I'd love to hear feedback on this live training, what y'all thought of it, anything we can do different, better, what worked, what didn't. We'd love to make this a more regular thing, because like, it's one thing to shoot a video that's not live and then you release it, but I think the interactive element kind of adds something and makes it a little bit more dynamic and hopefully more useful. So just let me know below what y'all think of this, and hopefully we'll do some more. So with that in mind, Thanks everybody for joining. Appreciate it. Appreciate you taking time. I know some of you probably, if you're playing hooky from work, particular thanks for spending the time. I won't tell your boss if you don't. Yeah, thanks again for joining us. Hope to do this more in the future, and I will see you guys in the next one.